In my mind, I felt like I was being punished. And I'm like, okay, this number's super high. It's almost screaming how bad I am that I have HIV. That's how it made me feel. It wasn't like I had this little viral load and, I just kind of slipped by and I kind of got it. No, you've got it so bad that we're not going to even explain to you what 507,000 means. Okay, so the last time I met up with you guys, I was telling my story about the first few days after my diagnosis and kind of everything that went wrong with the doctor that I saw. And there were some things that I left out that I thought were important to add to that story. One of them being that doctor was an infectious disease doctor and no, internal medicine. The first one who saw me was an internal medicine doctor. He was the one that basically did the HIV test and called me and told me that I tested positive for the antibody. And then he referred me to somebody in his office who was infectious disease. So that's who I saw the next day. But the first doctor, when he sent my blood out and now I'm positive for HIV through the antibody test, he should have ordered my CD4 and my viral load. He only ordered a viral load. And then I went to the infectious disease doctor the next day, and I've talked about in my last video how that all went and how it was just a very cold experience and I really didn't get the help that I needed. And even in that appointment, he didn't check my blood work to see that a CD4 was ordered. So it wasn't until my HIV doctor was aware of me coming to her and she checked the order through the system and saw that a CD4 was never ordered. So she basically intercepted that blood work and said, make sure the CD4 is done also. So that was something very important, that neither of those doctors had ordered a CD4, and that should have been done originally when my blood was taken, when I, came up positive for the HIV antibody. So that was one thing. When the receptionist called me to tell me, I think it was about 2 days after that visit with that infectious disease doctor, and she called me to tell me that my viral load was 507,000. I remember repeating to her like that number and her like not giving me anything back. And I know she knew from the way I was saying it back to her that I didn't know what that meant and that it was scary. And I was like questioning, my God, what does 507,000 mean? To me, I thought I was honestly dying. And, of course, and like I've said, I was really sick at that moment. And she didn't give me anything or say, I'll get back to you, or explain anything in any way, maybe because she didn't know it. But in my mind, I felt like I was being punished. And I'm like, okay, this number's super high. It's almost screaming how bad I am that I have HIV. That's how it made me feel. It wasn't like I had this little viral load and, I just kind of slipped by and I kind of got it. No, you've got it so bad that we're not going to even explain to you what 507,000 means. That's how it felt. And I know she probably didn't mean that, but in my mind, her not even trying to help me with that number or help me comprehend what it was, I felt like it was just kind of like it's so juvenile, but it felt like a neener. You've got this horrible thing now and you're going to have to just figure it out. That's how it felt. And like I said, I don't really even know what went through her mind, but on my end, that's how it felt. It felt awful not to get a little bit more information. Okay, so another thing I forgot to say about that infectious disease doctor when I went in, I did have AIDS at that moment. They did not know that because my blood work wasn't back, but I had been saying that I have all this white stuff in my mouth and I keep brushing my teeth and it keeps coming back. I didn't realize I had thrush. And he told me, like, he should have known right away. I tested positive for HIV. My mouth keeps turning white and it's like flaking out. I mean, I could literally spit out the yeast. It was so gross. He told me to choose cinnamon gum. That was his advice. And so I did. I went and bought cinnamon gum and it burned the shit out of my mouth because my mouth honestly was like, it's almost like the whole thing's like it's raw. It feels really raw. And so the cinnamon gum just burned so bad. And I would try to withstand it because I thought, well, maybe this is going to fix it. And I remember when my HIV doctor found out that he had done that he had prescribed that. And she was just like, she was writing things down or like typing it in and just going, oh my God, like I know in her head she was thinking, could this have been any worse? Like how he had handled it. So she was just, yeah, I could just totally tell by her reaction that that was absolutely the wrong thing to do. And he should have understood that if I had tested positive for HIV and had thrush or had anything white in my mouth, that there was a very good chance that I had a very low CD4 count and that something else was going on. But he didn't pick up on that. And being an infectious disease doctor, it's kind of shocking that he didn't. So the day after I was sent home and I called him, and this is like I'd taken AAA and I felt really bad, and we ended up calling him the next day and saying, or I ended up calling him the next day and saying, look, I am not doing well, and I'm really like, you know, of course, like I said, we still had that sort of wondering if it was, you know, truly HIV because it was just the antibody that was positive, and that one doctor said it could be a false positive. But, of course, I felt like it was HIV, but still, we're still not going on much. It feels like the information that we've been given it's not solid enough, and I don't feel like I've had really anybody really going, yes, this is what you're going to see, this is what's going to happen. He just like sent me to the pharmacy and said, you're going to take this medication now. And you know, and I wasn't feeling well, and so I'm putting this pill down my throat that's making me feel worse. And obviously at the time I didn't realize I was coming down with pneumonia. So I call him. I think I'd taken the pill the second time. I'd taken it the day before, and now it was the second day. And I was like, I called him. I probably took it like in the early afternoon, and I called before the office closed and said, look, I need to talk to the doctor. I really don't feel well. And that's when he asked me if I had issues with like being a hypochondriac, and maybe this was just anxiety that I was experiencing. And that he said, you know, do you usually get like overly worked up about things? I'm like, I mean, to know later that I literally had AIDS, and like the guy's asking me this is just unreal looking back at it. But I'm like questioning it in my head going, am I really overreacting right now? Like I know I really feel bad, but the point of this is that he thought, we'll prescribe you, or I'll prescribe you Xanax. But he looked up on the system, and my insurance through California, it's free, it's low income free insurance through California, the state of California, didn't cover Xanax. So the only way to get it was to go and try to override it, basically. And I used to work pharmaceuticals, and I understand this process. It's called a TAR, and they basically have to get a hold of the insurance company and explain to them why this medication is a better choice. If it's not provided, you kind of have to just like push for it. And it's something typically that the offices will do for you, or like pharmaceutical sales reps will do for you or whatever. But I've never ever heard of a patient having to do that. And he actually said to me, you're probably going to need to call and have like an override done for this medication. He wanted me to do the legwork. And I was like, just to call him was hard enough. I was not doing well. And to mentally comprehend that I need to get a hold of the insurance company and try to like get this medication through. And I just decided no. I decided not to do the Xanax. So that was a horrible experience in itself, just that whole thing. And then, so like I said, we went to the emergency. I think it was that night, and that's where they basically looked at me like, oh, what do you want us to tell you? I mean, they don't have blood work in front of them. They don't have any results, so they really couldn't do anything for me. And that was a big waste of time. Oh, and the other thing that I didn't mention about him putting me on AAA without knowing my phenotyping and genotyping, without knowing what I'm resistant to or sensitive to, is that what my doctor explained to me is that if I had taken a medication that I was resistant to, it could create resistance for other medications that I had been sensitive to. So if there were medications that I might have been able to use, taking AAA, if I had been resistant to it, could have affected me taking medication that could help me eventually. So thankfully, the medications that are in AAA, I did match up with as being sensitive to, and it didn't affect, you know, any medication that I'm taking now. But she said that was a possibility, and that's why you don't put people on medication until you know what they're resistant to and sensitive to, because it can build up resistance to other medications that would have otherwise been okay. So that was why him prescribing AAA before getting my blood work back was not smart and actually really unsafe, considering you need this medication to stay alive. So, because somebody had written a comment and said, well, it wasn't really that bad what he did. It was like, yeah, it was. It was pretty bad. And then something else I thought about is the pharmacist that I go in and see. She's a pharmacy tech. Araceli, I'd mentioned her. And the thing about her is that I've gone to her for years with my kids, like, you know, ear infections and strep throat and you name it. We're at the pharmacy all the time with 3 kids. I was there all the time. So having to see her for me for HIV medication, it was like, I can't explain the shame. Here I am, the single mom with 3 kids, and you know, she's probably assuming I'm not a very good mom and that I've been doing bad things, and now I have HIV, and I'm no longer this, you know, strong mother who's taking care of her 3 kids, who's getting everything done. I'm somebody who did something wrong. And that's, you know, it's in me. That's how I felt, but I don't know if she felt that. But of course, those are the stigmas that go through my head as I'm having to see her again. And, you know, she's so great. Like, I don't get that from her at all. And they know my story, and they know everything that I've been through and how everything's turned out. So there's not any of that anymore. But initially going in, I did have that feeling. So, and then the pharmacist who ended up giving me the medication was an older gentleman who'd been there for years also. Really nice gentleman. Very soft-spoken, and I remember him explaining to me, like, it was so awkward and so uncomfortable for me because, again, he had been basically the main person who gave me medication for my kids. And so he's explaining to me, like, you know, you might have a really strong reaction at first. It takes a few days for your body to adjust to the medication. And all I could think of is, like, I mean, he was such a nice guy. You know, he probably goes to church every Sunday and has been married for 50 years and has, you know, 3 kids, and they're all doctors and they all have kids. And now here I am, the single mom with 3 kids, walking in with HIV. And I was so ashamed of myself, and it was bad. It felt horrible. And, but also I was so freaking desperate to be better that, you know, when you're in like horrible pain or you're faced with, you know, shame like that, sometimes you're also faced with being desperate to get better, or, you know, want to change the situation. So you still walk through it even though it's super uncomfortable, because you just want to get everything turned around the right way. So I remember feeling like that with him. I just was so full of shame, but at the same time I needed this medication because I thought I need to turn this around. I'm so sick. So there was that. That was really a poignant moment with my pharmacist, and just such a nice man. I mean, he never made me feel bad. It was all in my head and my own stigma, my self-stigma. I finally end up at my doctor's office. It was a Friday. This was with my HIV doctor now, who I still have. She's female. She is female, and she was just amazing. I remember walking in and her saying, you know, you do have AIDS, and, you know, if this were 10 to 15 years earlier, you know, you probably wouldn't be here. We probably would have given you about 2 months, but things have changed today, and, you know, this is gonna turn around, and this is gonna be a distant memory. I remember her saying all of that, and her telling me about a man who was like 80 years old, who was still snowboarding, who had HIV, and he's still doing great today. I remember her specifically telling me about that patient. And so I was like, okay, you know, because I asked her, how long am I gonna live? And she said, you're gonna live the same, you know, life that you always had. And in fact, people with HIV are sometimes a lot more healthy than the general public, because we're constantly on top of our care. We're going and having our blood work done every 3 months, and we're seeing our doctor every 3 months or 3 to 6 months. And, you know, there's a lot of people that will go 10, 15 years, 20 years. They will never go to the doctor. So we're like really on top of our health, and we know what's happening in our bodies because we have to. We need to be going and checking our blood and making sure all the levels are okay with our viral load and CD4. And in that way, we're on top of our health. So my lifespan wasn't going to change, and that was what I would really needed to hear. Was great. So we left there that day. We knew I had AIDS. We stopped the A-tripla, and she gave me nystatin for the thrush. So that's, you put it in your mouth, swish it around, and it really did get rid of it. It was amazing. It worked really quickly. So she gave me that. She put me on an antibiotic, Levaquin, which is for community-acquired pneumonia. I had PCP pneumonia, but of course we couldn't tell that at the time, but it's typical for HIV for it to be PCP pneumonia. But the antibiotic that I needed wasn't on my insurance, and it was going to cost $1,200. So basically what happened is that medication that I needed, Meprin, it wasn't available through my insurance, and it was going to cost a lot of money, or we were going to have to try to run it through with like, like approvals and all this stuff, which wasn't going to happen overnight. It was going to take time. So she just put me on the Levaquin, the nystatin for the thrush, and I think there might have been something else. And anyways, that was it. So I left there that day with that medication, and what happened is the Levaquin really wasn't doing anything because it wasn't treating the pneumonia. So the pneumonia from Friday through Sunday just got worse. It was basically like it wasn't being treated. So during that time, I was, really having a very hard time breathing. The aches and pains were unreal. The fevers were just constant. I can't believe how bad a fever can make you feel also. So the fever, my heart was racing nonstop, because that's just when your body's like in that state, your heart rate increases. So your heart's just going 1,000,000 miles a minute all the time, even when you're laying completely still. Moving was unbearable. I remember laying on the couch and I couldn't even reach for my phone to call my mom and Joey, who were upstairs, to tell them how bad I felt that night. Eric had left for a snowboarding trip that Friday. I was really glad that he was out of the house. I did not want him to see me in this condition. It's like a total reminder of everything that's happening. And it's like, here we're in this fairly new relationship after a year, and I just kind of wanted to be sick in private. So the timing was good. He was gone for a few days, and during that weekend, my mom was there with me. And that night, that Friday night, Eric was gone. Joey was upstairs sleeping, my daughter, and my mom and my stepdad were there. And my mom had not gotten much sleep the night before. She had come down the day before, and that night was bad. I remember she didn't get a lot of sleep, and it was just everything happening was really scary and all of that. So I knew she was really short on sleep. So I was laying on the couch downstairs, because her and my stepdad was sleeping in my bed upstairs. And so I was on the couch downstairs, and my daughter, Joey was 15. Ryan was like 12, so I wouldn't even think of texting her. So Joey was 15, and it took everything in me to just reach for my phone that Friday night to text Joey to tell her how bad I was feeling, but I think she was sleeping. And anyway, I got really spooked because I couldn't walk upstairs to tell everybody how I felt, and my mom was so exhausted, and I didn't want to bother her. And so I thought maybe I could really quietly just call 911 and have them come. I told Joey, could you just open the door for them when they get here, and then they could just take me to the hospital, and my mom can sleep, and she'll find out in the morning after she gets a good night's sleep that I've been at the hospital. So I know that sounds crazy, but I did. I called 911, and I told them that I had HIV and I have AIDS and I'm really sick and I think I need to go to the hospital. And so they show up. I live in a community where it's like everybody has the same kind of house. It's like one of those, it's all the tract homes and everything. So, and I think I even asked if they could not do the lights. Could you please not do the lights? Because it's like, it was like 11:30 at night. And they show up with the lights on because they say they have to do the lights. So of course my neighbors saw the lights, and they come in. My daughter lets them in, and of course my mom and Ron end up waking up, my mom and my stepdad, and everybody's downstairs at this point. And it couldn't have been more humiliating. I had probably six firemen standing there in my living room, standing around me. I was on my couch laying there in my pajamas on a towel or blanket, and what I was doing at that time was treating the pneumonia with Tylenol and ibuprofen, alternating it every 4 hours, because the antibiotic I thought just hadn't kicked in yet. What I later found out is that antibiotic wasn't really the right antibiotic. So anyways, it was really, really embarrassing. I basically they asked what's going on, and they're all standing around me, and they're like taking notes, and it was just so awkward. Like, you think of firemen, and they're these wholesome, nice men. They're there to help you, and I'm this freaking mom on a couch, sick as hell, with HIV, and AIDS. It was just the most embarrassing thing to have to announce. And I basically you know, we went over, I mean, they were really nice, but it was really awkward. And so the whole thing was deciding whether I go to the hospital or not. And it came down to an ambulance ride. And if I got in the ambulance, they would have to take me to the closest hospital, which is the one I didn't want to go to, because pretty much all the stuff that had been going wrong was sort of through that hospital. And so I really wanted to go to Santa Cruz, and they said that they couldn't provide that with the ambulance. And so it was like, I don't remember, it was something weird, like I'd have to call my insurance or something. So they were basically, the only way to get to Santa Cruz is if you drive yourself there and then go wait at the emergency. And then within all of this, the Tylenol kind of kicked in, and I had a little moment of like of reprieve, where I could just kind of like, you know, make a decision that I think they can go. Like, I think I can stay. I think I can get through this. But I had a massive moment of panic when I called 911. I thought I was slipping into death. I didn't even know. I was so scared because everything felt so bad at that moment, and I was freaked out because everybody was asleep upstairs, and I thought, I'm gonna die in my sleep on this couch, or I'm just gonna die down here. Like, that's how I felt. So it was like out of complete panic to call 911, and it was just completely out of sheer panic, and freaking out that I was gonna pass away. And it was just, the symptoms had just gotten so bad that night. So I went through the weekend. Wow, this video is already 23 minutes long. I'm going to continue this story after that evening into the weekend, and share with you how that weekend went, and basically how it all finally started to turn around on Monday. But I didn't realize how long this was. This kind of goes on for a while. There's a lot of details involved in that weekend, and yeah, it was like the worst weekend of my life, basically. It really was. So, okay, until next Monday, I'll come back. If not, maybe sooner. We'll see. If I have time, maybe I'll record it and upload it. But it'll be basically the Saturday, Sunday, Monday, after my diagnosis, after seeing my HIV doctor, taking medication for pneumonia that wasn't really the right medication, and how I finally did get the right medication, how that came to be, because it was a really wacky story. So, okay, until then, have a great week, you guys, and I will see you soon. Thanks for, you know, following me and hanging in there, and supporting my channel, and I appreciate it. I so do. So please like this video if you like it. All right, have a great week, you guys. Bye bye.